All right, guys, big episode today. Back with Eric from Higher Levels. I know a lot of you are familiar with him. We're going to be breaking down what it takes to break into tech sales with no experience going into 2025. Eric's probably more qualified than anyone to do this on the internet, but I'll toss it over to you, Eric, for a quick background as to who you are, what you've been doing the past couple of years, and we'll discuss what we're covering today.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, man. I was an engineer, just for everyone's reference, for about 3 years. I then switched over to tech sales. I've been doing that for 5 years, had a lot of success, and then kind of as a passion project that has grown into a whole different thing. Not sure for those of you that may be familiar with higherlevels.com or our YouTube channel, Tech Sales with Higher Levels, but we've basically given tons of advice out there on the internet on how to break in and everything about every section of your tech sales career. So now today, just wanted to take a chance to really deep dive what we're seeing this year alone. We've actually had more people this year, even when the economy's been like a little shaky, break in than the last 2 years combined. So we're seeing tons of success. We actually just had a 19-year-old break into a cybersecurity company and get a 90K starting SDR salary. So that's one of many cases that I'll talk about today and really give everyone just kind of a framework from the ground up to break in. So thanks for having me.
Not excited for it. It's always good to have you. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with Eric, but it's that time of year. It's the end of 2024. A lot of people probably thinking what they want to do in 2025, breaking in for the first time, or maybe you've been in the industry and trying to make a pivot. So we're going to be covering from the ground up, laying the foundation, deciding who is tech sales even for, the types of organizations, small versus large, optimizing your resume. We'll get into interview stuff, so getting your foot in the door and what it takes to actually crush the interviews once you get your foot in the door. And if we have time at the end, we'll discuss, we don't want to be presumptuous, but if you get multiple offers, what to do in those situations, how to negotiate. So this is going to be very valuable for a lot of you, we hope. And yeah, I guess, Eric, I'll kick it off because talk about a lot there. And there's a lot of different information out there when people first decide I might be interested in breaking into tech sales, but they don't know much more than that. They don't know what direction to start. Where do you tell people to start? There's all the training. What do you first recommend people do when they decide they're maybe interested in this career path in order to get their house in order?
Yeah, I think a few things come to mind. The first being, like, there's a ton more content about tech sales now on the internet than there used to be. So while I do advocate for certain trainings, I think if you're truly at zero, just take in a lot of free stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of reputable creators like yourself, like our channel as well, providing information about what the career is about. But additionally, I would just say, I also see a lot of people that kind of get this idea in their mind that they're going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's definitely possible. That's happened for both of us. But I will say the first couple of years are typically some of the most stressful and, require 10, 12-hour days on occasion when you're breaking into this career. So that's what I would say to anyone on the outside looking in. Like, if you're looking at this with a 5-year lens of, I want to see where this career can take me, that's really the way that I would approach it. Can I see myself doing this for 5 years? And if so, then I think that's a better way to approach it than thinking you'll break in year one and make $100,000 and then no real thought beyond that. I just see a lot of people that get kind of caught up chasing the money. And I think money is a great motivator. But that's where I would start, understanding what the SDR role is, getting, there's a lot of good interviews with people who have broken in and or people actively in the career. Start there for free. And then as you start to look at it, especially if you don't have any experience, now I would start to narrow in on what companies you want to work for. And just being realistic, if you have absolutely no experience, it's not worth going after like a Microsoft or an Amazon of the world. Again, we're taking the case that maybe you don't even have a degree, but there are tons of mid-size and startup companies that hire people that do not have any sales experience whatsoever. And we've seen that repeatedly. Like, I'm just naming one, so don't everybody just go and apply to this company. But like ZoomInfo is very notorious for being willing to hire people without college degrees and without sales experience. So those are the types of companies I'm going to find. That's one of many to try and get my foot in the door. And then in parallel, if I need to, I've seen a lot of students of ours that got 6 months of door-to-door or car sales experience in parallel to trying to break into tech sales. And that just kind of hedged their bet and really just got them any type of sales exposure whatsoever. So I'll pause because there's way more I could say, but that's like, if I'm thinking about this in the first 3 months, I'm going to learn about it with a bunch of free resources. Definitely, if you're in a position and want to invest in training, I recommend that, to kind of have the path laid out for you. But more importantly is educate yourself. look at this with a 5-year lens. And if you don't have any experience and aren't getting any bites whatsoever at companies that hire people without experience, at that point, I'm maybe going to look at getting a sales job in parallel, like retail sales, car sales, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with your point about there's more and more information out there. And I think people get a little lost in the sauce sometimes and try and listen to too many people. I think you just have to find a couple people. Hopefully we can be a couple of those people that you resonate with, where what they're saying, you're getting value out of, and just apply their techniques and what they're saying, and don't spread yourself too thin.
Yeah. And I'd add on the note of, I was just going to add on the note of training, like, hey, obviously at higher levels, like that is what we do with Tech Sales Ascension. We help people break in, but there's tons of programs out there, right? So the biggest thing is, I would say, take in a bunch of information. If you want training, go with the one that you feel best aligns with yourself. But on that note, I think you need to look at training as not like college alternative or this huge endeavor. The best types of training is going to come in and tell you exactly what you need to do and what you need to focus on. And it's going to eliminate you just hoping the YouTube algorithm gives you the right video next, right? And to your point, next thing you know, it's been 2 months and every night you're watching tech sales and sales videos from Jordan Belfort and Jeremy Miner and tech sales with higher levels and Connor Murray. And all of a sudden you haven't even like submitted one application. You feel like you know sales, but you haven't actually made any progress. So just a note on training, regardless of what you choose, like the one that you feel is the most reputable and aligned to you. And also I would say avoid the ones that are saying, oh, like this completely changed my life. Like I made $500,000 in year 1 or all these different things. The ones that are dramatizing and over glamorizing this career, to be honest, I find have questionable results at best. So my 2 cents there.
Agreed. And I want to dig a little deeper too into when people are first deciding what types of companies they might want to work for. You mentioned experience levels and how some companies are more open to different past levels of experience than others. Beyond that, and I think we have a good perspective here, how do you help people decide, and what should they be thinking about in terms of, some people like the idea of working for a larger, more established organization with a more traditional SDR program. Some people prefer that startup route. And I say we're probably uniquely qualified because we're on total opposite ends of the spectrum as to how we broke in. I went to one of, if not probably a top 5 largest tech company with big tech sales program. And you went the startup route. And there's obviously pros and cons to both. But what do you think people should be thinking about in terms of whether a startup is the right fit for them or more of a large organization? What are some of those variables you just tell them to think about?
Yeah, the way that I look at it is this: if you're in a position where you do get an offer from a brand name, it's your first ever tech sales type of job, SDR job, I would say in 80 to 90% of situations, it makes sense to go for that huge logo. And just for everyone's reference too, my first tech sales job, I was at a 200 to 250 person company, totally opposite. But the reason that I chose that over pursuing a large company is my first engineering job out of school was at a 10,000 plus person company, Fortune 1000 company, very renowned in Texas and really the US for its technology. And I hated it. There were so many people, so many processes, all of these different things that I was very, very intentional about trying to find a high growth startup that fit my personality. However, I will say, having worked at a very large company, even as an engineer, that brand name actually did give me a lot of credibility when I went into different interviews with startups and big companies. So all that to say, if you're breaking in for the first time, I think it's beneficial if you can get an offer at an Oracle of the world, a Salesforce of the world, an Amazon, a Microsoft, a very renowned company. That's going to set you up, even if you hate it. If you can survive there for 2 to 3 years, build a little bit of a track record of hitting quota, at that point, the sky's the limit wherever you want to go. Because if you're at AWS or Oracle or wherever, and you want to go to a startup, it's much easier to do that than work at a startup where things are questionable. You're not dealing necessarily with as many clients or as many resources as these huge companies have. Those huge companies often poach from parallel size companies. They're not always pulling from startups. So it's much easier to go from a huge market leader down to a smaller company where, by the way, you can still make a ton more money. It's not down in like a negative way. I just mean company size. But it's much easier to do that than start at a startup that may or may not survive long term, and then try and go up to a company the size of Oracle or AWS or Salesforce or all these different things. So
yep, I think that summarizes it pretty well. I think some other things to consider, just like your life situation, what type of risk you're looking to take on, and not that we're economists or anything, but like what's going on in the market. I think when we were breaking in like 5 or 6 years ago, the economy was chugging along. It was doing pretty well. I think it was a safer environment at the time for startups, because there's obviously more risk when you join a startup than a larger organization. But the last couple of years, like you could join a startup, kill it, do everything the right way, and there could be just a layoff that's totally out of your control. And there's that risk that you took on, where some of the more larger organizations, they have more of that stability than some of the smaller ones. So there's always a little bit more upside with the startups. A lot of times they have higher OTEs, maybe you get a little equity, you can promote faster, but then there's a little bit more risk as to what's going on in the business. They might not have as much training out of the gate and expect you to be more ready on day one. Where larger organizations, it's opposite. They'll be there, they'll have more support. But a lot of times the promotion path is really strict. You have to be there 12 or 18 months. It's actually gone up in a lot of cases. They've lengthened that cycle. And like you said, a lot more red tape, a little bit more bureaucracy. So but then you get the brand name behind you to sell. Like if you have a big brand name that's recognizable, it can be a lot more, it can do favors for you in the SDR job when one of your main goals is setting meetings. So there's no right answer. It's just thinking about your life situation. Are you willing to take on a little more risk? Are you more just looking to get that experience under your belt, even if there's a little less upside, and then make a pivot maybe to a smaller company? And I guess feeding off that, how do you tell people if they make the decision, I'm looking for more of that smaller startup type company, or I'm looking for a larger organization, or maybe they're doing both. Maybe they're interested in both and don't know what they want. Are there ways you tell them to tweak their resume or their LinkedIn, or ways they position themselves in the interview process based on what type of company they're looking to join, whether it's small or large?
Yeah, this is where I see most people mess up in general. A lot of people that are either coming from maybe a different industry with no sales experience, period, and or maybe you're like Christian, who was 19 years old, just broke into tech sales. He, through reaching out through Tech Sales Ascension, through all these different things, like learned how to do this. But I see a lot of people that are just expecting to apply. And to be honest, while I will answer your question directly, I just want to mention that like just tweaking your resume, just tweaking your LinkedIn to better fit a job description in sales specifically is not enough. And my point being, if you're not reaching out to people at the company, if you're not reaching out to the hiring manager, to the sales manager, if you're not reaching out to reps at the company to try and build your network or have a coffee chat for 15 minutes, you're wasting your time. So any type of like resume advice that I give you here, I don't want that to trump the fact or make you think that that's more important than actually reaching out to people. And this is really the biggest difference between I honestly, the people who make it happen and the people who don't. We have some incredibly smart people that we've worked with that will do exactly this. And they'll say, hey, could you review my resume for the 6th time? Because they sent it out to Salesforce and Oracle and it got rejected. And now they're like, oh, I need to change my resume. And then I asked them, how many places did you apply to? And how many people did you message? And they usually say, I've applied to 2 places or 1 place. And I messaged the hiring manager. And that was it. And it's like, we're wasting our time. So to answer your question, though, about the resume, the LinkedIn, I think the biggest thing is like a couple of different things. Once you make a very, very solid resume, and by the way, on YouTube, there's a lot of great free tutorials on how to make a tech sales specific resume. So start there if you need like foundational advice. But really from there, I would just pick off kind of the keywords in the job description itself. So as an example, I don't know, if they mention that they need someone who has a track record of leadership, right? They may say, we don't need sales experience, but we need someone who demonstrates qualities of a leader, shows extreme work ethic. And it's not just that it says that once, because there's going to be a ton of stuff in a job description. But if you read it thoroughly and read it through, there's going to be a couple different traits and skills that they repeat over and over and over again. So for instance, if they want to, leadership is one, work ethic, but maybe on a more like work related or results type of activity, they're going to say we need, a track record of results-driven or performance-driven environment. So that could be athletics, that could be something else, right? And as an example, one of the just giving one example of so many that I could talk about. Like when I was an engineer, but I was also an athlete for Team USA. And so while I did have some good engineering experience, I used a lot of my athletic experience to show that I'm competitive. I was in a performance-driven environment. And some of the stats that come to mind are I was on a team that beat Cuba for the first time in 32 years. We had actually not beaten Cuba since the 1980s or 90s. I forget exactly when it was with Team USA. So that's one way of saying like we got a tangible result of a win. We improved, etc. There were a couple tournaments that I finished second in, won different medals. And also in beach handball, which I played towards the latter part of my career, I ended up playing in a world championship, right? So these are the things where I didn't have sales experience. I didn't have customer facing experience, but I showed that I was in a competitive environment and got results. And there's so many people that like, I think take for granted, like whether it's a school project, whether it is, something outside of a direct academic or work environment. There's so many people that take for granted, like actually driving a result or just performing better than average compared to your peers that you could work in. But at the end of the day, all of these things that you have that are super relevant on your resume, there's going to be a lot of gold in the job description itself. And so I might even say, it's the difference between saying like, hey, I was the first team in 32 years to beat Cuba versus like, even if they say competitive, right? I might even just throw the word compete in that line because they said competitive 8 times in the job description, right? Or if they keep saying like results driven, I might, instead of saying like in my engineering experience, I could say, hey, like, performed 20% better than the average engineer on my team, resolving issues within 5 minutes, right? Or 5 business days or whatever our KPIs were. Instead, it's like, perform 20% better than average, driving results for customers. And I'm taking those exact keywords and I'm basically saying the same thing, but actually putting those keywords in the resume. So I'll pause because I feel like this is a tangent that could go all over the place, but hopefully
that's
for everyone.
That's what I tell people to have, like put in the effort, have that one very solid standard version of your resume. But anytime you're applying to a new company, look at that job posting, look at the keywords they mention over and over again that are important, the qualities they're looking for, and just try and reframe your standard resume to fit that. Because a lot of these companies, they get hundreds or dozens, if not hundreds of applications per job posting. And those keywords, a lot of times, they are not even manually reading all of those. They have ATS, like applicant tracking systems. And those keywords can be the difference between your resume getting flagged and put to the recruiter's attention and not. And it's not always going to work. But if you send out 50 applications and it makes a 2% or a 5% difference, that's the difference between landing a couple recruiter conversations or not. And oftentimes, if you can at least just get that recruiter conversation, that initial one going, that's what's going to help you land the job. You can impress them on that call. That's how I really look at the resume. It's really just to get your foot in the door. And once you're in the door, the resume's kind of done its job. And now they're going to be like actually listening to you when they interview you and ask you about some of these traits they're looking for.
And if I could add one other thing too, I know people have differing opinions on this, but quite frankly, they're wrong. And I'm right on this one. I'm going to take it to the grave. I don't care. But I think the biggest opportunity people miss, especially if you have no sales experience, maybe you're coming from different careers altogether. Maybe you've had a couple different careers. Like in my case, I was an athlete at a high level and also worked as an engineer. I always add a 2-sentence objective statement at the top, very quickly summarizing my experience. And it also hits on what we talked about earlier with those keywords. So you're not going to be able to fit every single keyword in a row. But as an example, when recruiters looked at my resume, and I found this when I was breaking in, there was potential confusion and or doubt that sales was going to be the long-term career path for me. Because when they look at it, they saw, in my case, like strong student in engineering, got a great job in engineering, quit that to become an athlete. Why does this person now want to start over in sales, right? And so I think I solved a lot of those problems. And for those of you with feeling like maybe you don't have relevant experience or you're not sure how to stand out, I think a really solid 2-line, 2-sentence at most objective statement at the top just stands out so well to a recruiter or manager, where it's the difference between just sending a resume and saying like, here, you scan through my experience and figure it out, versus at the top of my resume when I was breaking in, I put former engineer and national team athlete transitioning to a competitive tech sales career that leverages my technical experience. Like, I know in that case, maybe you don't have that. That's just one example of so many, but that created so much interest right out of the gate that I see people, they just completely miss on. Or maybe like we just had someone with 7 years of car sales experience get a 130K job, and they were doing the exact same thing. They put, 7+ years of luxury automobile sales experience, and right away I'm at least interested. That's just getting my foot in the door. It doesn't mean I'm going to get the job, but when you can clear that up for me and I don't have to scan through your resume, see if your experience is legit, and you put that on a tee for me that you have 7 years of car sales experience and luxury car sales experience, like perfect, right?
Yep.
Or there's so many things and so many examples I could give, but I just can't stress that enough. And that's something that we preach on our YouTube channel as well. If you search resume, create a tech sales resume, you'll probably see our video pop up. And that's something I go in much greater depth on there too. So yeah.
No, that's gold. It's the little details that can make tangible differences, especially when you're doing this at scale, because you're probably applying to lots of different companies, and these little details can be the difference between landing a certain recruiter interview or not. So yeah, I mean, we kind of, where I wanted to take this next, and we've kind of covered some of it, is getting your foot in the door. So obviously that's a lot of what we just talked about, the resume, optimizing your LinkedIn, looking for those keywords and traits that they're looking for. You mentioned earlier, reaching out to reps at the company. What are the other things people can be doing if they're doing all the stuff you just talked about with the resume and they're still not getting the replies? Maybe they're just clicking apply, and not doing much more. What are those things that people should be doing to separate themselves from the sea of applicants that all of these companies are getting for these job postings?
Yeah. And I think it's worth taking a section here to talk about like how to message and how to reach out to people at the company. I mean, this is something we could talk about for 2-3 hours alone, but I'd also add to, again, I'm not advocating for any specific program. Do your own research and find one that is best for you if you want to invest in training. But just throwing out, like, this is why after a while, even with our YouTube channels growing, it's like, I think when we both started, we envisioned like giving a lot of great free quality information, and that helps a lot. But still, people need and request from us constantly training, because it's all of these different things. Like maybe you do get a killer resume, but you've never actually written a cold email or cold message before. And you see on the internet that now you need to message people. Well, how do you even do that effectively, right? And so I'm just reiterating, like, if this seems overwhelming, like it is going to take a little bit of time to understand, but that's also why some of the programs that exist out there exist, because it puts all of this on in a way of just like, this is what you do, take this, make it your own, and do it. Stop asking, how do I do this? Stop searching for other videos. But I digress. Getting into like how to actually message people, and like, honestly, I would say this is almost more important than getting the perfect resume. In fact, I would say that it is. So like, especially right now, even though the economy, I will say, is better. Like I said, this year alone, we've seen twice as many people as the previous 2 years combined get hired. I think the market's turning around. I think the opportunity's there. I think the reason it seems a little bit more competitive right now is because tech sales as a career has grown in popularity. So you have more applicants. I don't even think it's necessarily that jobs are way down or all of these different things. But again, I actually have a conversation that's going to go live on my channel in the future with an SDR manager at a company, actually a former student of ours. They put out a SDR application. They got over 700 applicants, and 8 people messaged him. Literally only 8 people messaged him, and 2 of those people cold called him. Those 2 people that cold called got an instant interview right then and there, even though it wasn't great. And of the 8 people that sent messages, I think 6 of them also got interviews. And then he found a few resumes that he really liked. But this is like what I cannot stress enough. If you see 500 plus applicants, if you see 1,000 plus applicants, it's just a sign that the career is popular, but there's a ton of bullshitters who have no business applying for a tech sales job. And if you learn how to message effectively, that will stand out way more than the resume. Like, and again, in that conversation that will go live in the future, we don't even talk about resume tips. Like, the whole conversation is about how to message, because that's really all he gave a shit about. When he has a stack of 1,000 applicants and 1,000 resumes, he's not looking at every single one of those. There's no chance. So
I've been an SDR manager. It's overwhelming at times. Like, you have too many resumes. Every person thinks their resume is getting scanned from top to bottom. It's just not true. Like, I have a full-time day job I'm also doing, and this is just one component. I have a stack of 100 resumes. Like if you message me, you're getting put to the top of the pot. Like I'm going to pull out your resume and actually look at it.
Yeah.
So everything you're saying, spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that note too, it's like, now let's talk about what does a good message look like? How do you even message someone in the first place? Right. And this is where also a lot of people mess up because they're so excited. They get, they see Connor's videos about Oracle and some video that we made about how Connor made X $100,000 or all these different things. And they're like, Oracle is the greatest company ever. And then all of a sudden they send their life story to Connor, who on a Thursday afternoon has had to deal with so much shit this week. He's like, forgot that he's even hiring, forgot that applicants are still trying to reach out to him, and then sees your message that's this long and has your life story in it and is like, nope, you can't be concise. You can't write an effective message. There's no chance I'm hiring you as an SDR.
Giving me flashbacks because that's how it goes down a lot of times.
Yeah. And it's so again, like, yes, you want to message people, but there's a right and a wrong way to do that, right? And so I think when you're thinking about how to craft an effective message, obviously, if you're messaging the hiring manager directly, which I absolutely recommend, that's one path. I also recommend, reaching out to other SDRs, and there's a few other people within the organization that may make sense and have influence. But as an example, let's take, the example that Connor, you're messaging Connor directly and he's the SDR manager. Connor, again, is super busy. He's already managing a team of probably 10 plus SDRs. Look, like he wants to hire someone who's great, but at the end of the day, he's looking for maybe 5 to 10 people that he trusts enough based on whether it's their messaging or their resume, or they have a super strong profile. Just wants to find 10 people at most that he can have a conversation with and filter out very quickly. So your goal is not to sell yourself in a single message and include every life detail of everything you've ever done. In fact, I would say it's borderline the opposite, and you want to approach it with the lens of, why are you going to be the best SDR Connor has? And again, we're not selling. It's what does it mean to be a very effective SDR, right? Someone who can come in and is self-directed, can do a lot on their own. Someone who has a proven track record, ideally, of accomplishing something. Doesn't even have to be sales specific necessarily. Doesn't have to be anything overwhelming, but just give me a sense that you're the kind of person that gets focused on something that you want to do and you then excel at it, whatever that might be. And then really from there, it's just a simple ask for the meeting, right? So this does not take more than 3 to 4 sentences. And in fact, I would argue it's actually harder to write a very compelling 3 sentences than it is to include a super lengthy and detailed message. And so when you're thinking about it again, and cut me off at any time, because this could be like a 3-hour conversation. I've got examples that come to mind. But yeah, like let's say this is exactly what I did when I was breaking in. And again, rip out my experience and insert your relevant experience, whatever that is. But if I was applying to Oracle trying to break in and Connor's the SDR manager, I'm first going to submit my application. So my information is already in their system. So when Connor gets my message and likes me, he can very quickly go into their applicant system and get all of my information and then select, there's different systems, but he can basically find my information and then move me to an interview and schedule me immediately because all of my information is there. So I'm going to submit my application first, and then I'm going to send Connor a message. Hey, Connor, just submitted my application for Oracle. I'm a former engineer and national team athlete transitioning to a more competitive role in tech sales. I'd love to meet this week for 15 minutes and see if there's a mutual fit for the opening. And I just ripped that off the cuff. It could definitely be a little bit cleaner, a little bit crisper, but that conciseness, that willingness to say, hey, I've accomplished something. I really like the Oracle role for these reasons. You could maybe add one more sentence about why you want to work at Oracle specifically. And then you're going to ask for 15 minutes to see if it's a mutual fit. And that's it. We're not talking about your length of accomplishments. You're not going to talk about why you think you've talked to so many people and you know that Oracle is the best company in the world and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be very focused, very accommodating for the fact that Connor is a busy dude, and also gives Connor the ability to see this and in 20 seconds say, yeah, all right, I like that. Let's get him on a phone and let's see if in 15 minutes he's legit. Simple as that. So
that's money. And one other thing I'd add too, and that's great. And if I was a manager and you sent me a message like that and I fast tracked, looked at your resume, was like, okay, this checks out, I would set up a call with someone like that. I know just from experience, there's a lot of managers too who purposely, even if your first message is concise, your resume looks good, they'll just not respond to your first message because they almost want to see like how serious, or if you're a hustler, like if you're taking this seriously. So follow up too. Just because they don't respond doesn't mean they didn't like your resume. A lot of people, sometimes they get busy. I've had that happen where I was like, oh, I'm going to reach back out. But then something comes up in my day, and 3 days later, I realize, oh, I never responded to that person, but they never reached. I'm going to see if they reach back out to me now. And if they don't, I just never followed up. But sometimes they did. And that's the way you'll be following up on the job too. And it doesn't need to be anything fancy, but if a couple days go by, like 1 or 2 days go by, you can just say like, hey, just want to make sure you saw this, would really appreciate the opportunity to speak and discuss how I could add value to your team, or something like that. And then maybe you cold call them after that if they're still not responding. Like, you can pull out all stops. You don't want to hound them, but yeah, you want to be showing you know how to do the SDR job almost before they've even hired you.
Well, I would add too, like when you structure a really well thought out email, that's basically your cold call script as well. You know, it's like, if I were to find Connor's number on Apollo or in an email signature, whatever it might be, however I get his phone number, maybe it's from an SDR on his team, right? I might message an SDR and it's similar ask, right? But let's say I have Connor's number, whether he picks up or not, you know, if I leave a voicemail or he does pick up, it's more or less going to be the same thing. Like, hey, Connor, Eric Finch, how are you? Hey, good. Reaching out because I actually just applied for the SDR position. I'll save you the time, but I'm a former engineer and national team athlete that I love my tech experience, but I want to be in a more competitive environment as an SDR. Oracle has a lot of things that are amazing. I know its training program is really renowned, and you have a history of really building careers in tech sales specifically. Do you think we could meet for 15 minutes this week and see if there's an opportunity for me to be the next SDR on your team? You know, long-winded, that was off the cuff. It wasn't perfect, but it's literally leveraging what you've already created in your messaging to do the exact same thing. So
exactly. And that's 99% of candidates are not doing that. So like, just the basics that we're talking about on this one video here can separate yourself. But yeah, like you said, we could go on for hours about that. Let's assume people put in the work, they start doing these things, the responses start coming in, some recruiter interviews, some screening interviews start getting set up. Again, this is something that could literally be 3 hours or more, how to crush an interview. But what are some of those basics? Like, we could go into just brief, like obvious common mistakes that people make. What are the basics people should just nail before they start stretching themselves too thin and worrying about every situational question? Like, what are the basics that people need to nail once they land these interviews?
Yeah, your first interview with the recruiter or even with the manager is literally going to be more or less this. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want to be in tech sales? And why do you want to work at this company specifically? Yep. If you don't have answers to those that are very concise and compelling, forget everything else. Don't worry about the tell me about a time when, tell me about, you know, a time you got constructive feedback or all that shit. That will, like, if you don't have those first three, you're wasting your time planning for anything else. What I recommend for those three with the tell me about yourself, 90 seconds or less. And then you don't have to tell your life story, but if there's things that you could elaborate on and go into much greater detail, i.e. in my case, my athletic career, you can always leave it open-ended. So instead of spending 5 minutes telling them every single detail about my career, it's the difference between saying like, yeah, I was an engineer for 3 years while also being a student athlete in college. I was working and training at the same time. And ultimately, I wasn't really gung-ho about my engineering career long-term. I ended up deciding to take a year to attempt to qualify for the Olympics one last time. I played overseas. I'm happy to elaborate on that further if you'd like. But now coming back into my professional career, I've realized and done a lot of research around tech sales, how it leverages my technical background and competitive side. Anyway, that's a snippet of a total answer. But what I've done is not told my life story, but I've basically put up parameters on the conversation where I've created a lot of interest in things I can talk about more. And the recruiter is not going to have to really try hard to ask other questions about like, oh, that's cool. So like, and then they have to, you know, because your answer just went on forever and they stopped listening 2 minutes ago. Instead, if you give a very compelling 90-second answer with a couple logical, you know, highlight the big accomplishments, let them know you're willing to go into more detail if they'd like, but get that to 90 seconds or less. And now you've basically established the whole frame of the entire interview and really know exactly where it's going to go. And then same thing with why do you want to do tech sales? 60 seconds or less on this one. You can always elaborate further if needed, but also keep in mind this one, the real tough thing that's hard to communicate sometimes is like, you want more money, you're competitive. Like we get it, right? Like,
yep.
So is every single person that comes in here. So even if that is, you are money motivated, you are wanting for, more upside than your current career path, that's legitimate. But I actually think what people don't do well is actually, without trashing their former employer or whatever it might be, they don't really highlight how frustrated they are with not being able to make more money right now.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing of many that I honestly find. It's like, yes, if you're money motivated, that's great, right? But if you make, 150 to 250K for like 1 or 2 years, you're probably going to lose momentum. In my case, I think one thing that really stood out is like, I worked 70 to 80-hour weeks as an engineer and did not get paid $1 more for working overtime. Like, I did that for 3 years and was basically taken advantage of by my former employer.
Yeah.
I didn't say it that bluntly, but that is the contrast that I created in my interview when it's saying why tech sales is like, obviously the money is a huge component. I want to advance my career. But to be honest with you, like when I entered the workforce, I wanted to run through a wall. I was working 70, 80 hours a week as an engineer, and I didn't get compensated for that whatsoever. And it was very hard to stay motivated. Like, money is not the sole driver for me. However, I am insanely competitive, and to not be rewarded for anything that I'm doing above and beyond really makes me like spin my wheels and lose motivation after a while. So that's why I'm transitioning into tech sales specifically. And I think like I'm more or less saying I'm driven. I want, more money. I'm a competitive person, but I'm really highlighting in depth why that is important to me specifically. Right. And so even if you don't have tech sales, much of a corporate experience, like if you've been working 80 hours a week, like we had someone without a degree that worked in, their family's construction business. They were busting their ass doing everything from sales of cabinetry to, project management out on site. They're working 80, 100-hour weeks, and they really wanted to carve their own path. And like, that is a story that really, really resonates if you show, hey, I have been working my ass off and already have the work ethic that would make me successful in tech sales. And I'm tired of not being rewarded for that effort. But obviously the last question is why this company specifically, but I'll pause because I feel like I've been talking forever. So
no, I always tell people, emphasize, it shows you understand what a sales role is too, that you like the idea of a performance-based career. You like the idea that the harder you work, the more effort you put in, the more you can get ahead from both an income standpoint and a career standpoint. Don't just say you like money. That's a huge mistake. Like, yeah, we all want to make money. That was one of the big reasons I got into it too. But I've been one of those managers who asked, so what made you want to get into tech sales specifically? And they just kind of have a smile and they're like, I want to make a lot of money. I want to make 6 figures. And it's like, agree. I have nothing wrong with that, but that's like your chance to knock it out of the park. And you laid it out perfectly. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want to go into tech sales and why do you want to do so at this specific company? Those are the questions you need to nail throughout all stages of the interview process, not just the screening interview too. What I'll say, I want people to know this about the screening interview too. It's a double-edged sword. I don't think people realize how important that initial interview can be, because a lot of times those recruiters, they're writing down everything you're saying. They're writing down feedback. A lot of times they're even scoring you. So based on how well you conduct yourself and how good of answers you have to those basics, they're relaying that information to the manager afterwards. And it can really influence how they approach that when they go into it. If they go in and the recruiter's like, this person's a home run, like perfect fit for the role, like 5 out of 5 or whatever their scoring metric is, that can totally influence the interviewer. Where if you're not prepared for those and at the recruiter interview, but maybe you get it together for the manager interview, it can be too late because the recruiter could be like, they seemed a little unprepared all over the place. And again, it just impacts the hiring manager. Those are by far the most important basics to nail before you start worrying, like you said, about tell me about a time this happened or that happened and how you overcame it.
One last thing I'd add too is, there's so many examples of things you could say for why this company specifically, but a more advanced technique that we talk about a lot when you do get that question, there's a right and a wrong way to do this. And again, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but for anyone watching as well, like one of the biggest symptoms I see is like you finally land that interview with Oracle, with Snowflake, and you're like, holy shit, this would be like my dream company. Like I absolutely want to work there. And you get so laser focused on the perfect answer that I think a lot of people miss the opportunity, especially when asked why this company, to actually like casually, there's a right and a wrong way again to do this, but mention that how it compares to other companies that you're speaking to currently. I think that's a very important thing that people miss on is, look, like, again, you could have perfect answers, you could do all these different things, but at some point, like, it actually benefits you to have them know that you're interviewing with other companies. And to be honest, whether you are or not, like you may not have any other interviews lined up, but aside from all the things you could research and say about why this company specifically, where most people miss is just adding an extra 10 seconds to that response of like, hey, you know, why do I want to work at Oracle? You guys are a market leader. Obviously, you have a training program that's renowned. Like for me, leaving an engineering career and making this career transition, I don't want to just work at any company to have tech sales experience. I want to learn this the right way. Oracle's been around for what, 50, 60 years, however long it's been now. You guys have not only a history of training people from the ground up who have gone on to have extremely successful careers, but also SDRs specifically that go through your program. I've seen a history of you promoting the top performers consistently 12 to 18 months in. And I know I have to prove myself, but I know that opportunity is here compared to a lot of the other companies I'm speaking with right now. They do have training programs or all of these different things, but quite frankly, when you dig deep on LinkedIn, there's not that history like they always tell you about promoting SDRs or really making sure their top performers are taken care of. And I've seen that here in Oracle. And based on even this conversation today, I'm really excited with what I've seen. And by doing that, yeah, now granted, you have to crush everything leading up to that. But now Connor's like, oh shit, this guy's a killer. I absolutely have to have them on my team, and he's talking to other people. You might even see, and this is actually a sign that you're crushing the interview, as Connor would say, oh, interesting. Like, I guess what other companies are you talking to right now? And if they ask you that, you're killing it. Exactly. So, yeah. So that's definitely more advanced, and like you have to have a lot of things go right and kind of have a system in place to get to that point to where it has as much weight as we're talking about. But these are just the small things that, again, if they're only hiring for one position and it's down to you and another person, these are the small things that are going to make you the clear number one, not just a top 10% candidate in their pool. So, yeah.
And that is advanced. And like with reps and practice, and the more times you do this, you'll get to the point that Eric just was. But I think just demonstrating you've put in some level of preparation and done some research on the company. And you can simply do this by going on the website. If you're applying a Snowflake or something, go on the website. How do they communicate their value proposition? How they've helped other customers? Check out some of their success stories. You don't need to know them down to a T, but you can reference like, yeah, I saw this success story. I really like Snowflake's position in the market. A lot of times too, you can Google like Snowflake investor relations, and they have like these conference calls or little fireside chats where the CEO, they're like 20 minutes and they talk about the value proposition of the company, where the company's headed, why they're in a good position. And if you bring up something like, yeah, I was all over the website, I listened to the CEO's most recent fireside chat, I really like how they said X, Y, Z, like they'll be like, whoa, I promise you, no one's bringing up fireside chats on interviews. I've never seen it happen, but it's right there. It's on the website. And just being able to speak the language, that's something companies are really good at, is when they create their websites, they're very concise in their language as to what their value proposition, what pain points and challenges they solve. If you can communicate any of that at even a basic level, it just shows that you actually, this wasn't just an application you submitted, that you actually are excited about working for this company and you've been doing your research. So we can go on about,
No, we could get really deep on that. And another great example, like there's no one answer about why this company, but I just say in closing on this point too, is it's like, this kind of seems overwhelming. It seems like there's a ton of information that could be the right answer, but whether you have coaching and or whether you just actually do the effort, like one time, you'll probably sink 2 to 3 hours doing this for like one company. But then when you figure out, you know, the exact types of resources like Connor's talking about, fireside chats, podcasts, different SDRs that post about the company or whatever it might be, you can really quickly, only once you land an interview with a company, you can then in 30 minutes really get very deep information because you know exactly where to find it. And your peers, 90+% of them are not even searching up anything more than just the job description. So if that, I mean, So we could go really deep on that, but
honestly, answering those three questions well, in my opinion, is like 70% of the battle, depending on where you're applying. So yeah, we got a lot more on that, but let's assume, all right, and maybe this is a part of the video people come back to, but you got some offers in your hand now. I see this situation come up a lot where someone reaches out like, Connor, I have this offer. I have till the end of the week to respond, but I have another company that I have a final round interview with them, or maybe they have multiple offers. How do you go about, and this can be probably changed depending on the situation, but when it comes to negotiations, because I see a lot of people do this the right way and the wrong way. I guess just at a high level, what do you see out there when it comes, what works when it comes to negotiating offers, and where do you see people shoot themselves in the foot?
Yeah, I have seen people, just for reference, that get so fixated on their first job being 100K or wanting an extra 5K that they have literally lost job opportunities because they got selfish. So there's two sides of the coin. And I think at the end of the day, like the overall way that I approach this before I give specific tactical information is if you have multiple job offers, that's great, right? If you're in a position to negotiate, you need to negotiate and be willing to, you need to know what your minimum is. I've had students that have asked to, for 5 or 10K more. The company said no, but they did it in a right way and still had the offer on the table and ultimately did work there. But there are some scenarios where, for instance, if you're kind of close with two companies, one company came in at 75, the other one came in at 80, but you're not as crazy about the 81. But if they paid you 90, you would actually probably take that. You need to be willing to ask for that, and we'll get into how to do that. But also, if they don't, it's just a simple decision at that point. And lastly, the more from like a emotional or just approaching this the right way for a long-term career, year one, guys, like 10K more on paper when 5,000 more of that is base salary and 5,000 more is commission. If you have a job offer at a market leader, at an Oracle or a Salesforce, and you like it too, like if you hate it, if you get weird vibes, like sure, you can consider the other opportunity. But if you have a really, really great like tier 1 level tech sales role and they're offering you 75, and you have a startup or a slightly smaller company or whatever it might be that's offering you 90, but you are very concerned about your chances of success there, but you're letting that perceived 15K difference like totally jade your judgment, and it makes you feel like 75 at Oracle or AWS or wherever is way too low. Don't worry about that. Like getting it, like the way you make the most money in tech sales is year 3, 4, 5 and beyond. And realistically, probably year 4 and beyond. So the difference between getting a track record of 2 or 3 years at Google, at Oracle, at Salesforce, or whatever it might be, even if you make less money, when you jump and go somewhere else, they'll like double your salary in many cases, right? Like if you're going from an SDR or an SMBAE role, you can get a 50 to 100% raise going externally at that point. So who gives a shit about a 10K difference at a company that you're not super fired up about and really, may or may not, be successful, may or may not help you get your next job in the future 2 to 5 years down the line? Take the opportunity that gives you the most long-term success. Year one, your salary is like, whatever. Anyway, sorry, that may have been like too much preface, but yeah. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, sorry.
It's about the 3 to 5 year outlook. And I always tell people negotiation needs to come from a position of strength. Like you should have an offer you're happy about, whether it was your first choice or your second choice, have that locked down, and then use the negotiation, in my opinion, for those companies maybe you weren't as excited about, but if they were to offer you like 20, 25K more or something, and you really want to play that game, fine, like risk it with the company you weren't as excited about, but lock down that one offer that you're excited about, that like maybe it's not the highest OTE that I could get out there, but it's going to get me the experience I need over the next 3 years. Because really what it's about is just lasting that 3 to 5 years. A lot of people break in. We're talking about breaking in today, but a lot of people also break out. They drop out after like a year or two, and they miss out on that upside of moving to mid-market account executive, then mid-market, then enterprise. That's what it's about. It's about landing in a company you're happy about that'll give you the experience you need, whether you can promote internally there to where you want to go or get the experience you need and then leave. Don't throw all that out the window over 5K or because you tried to get cute. Have your guaranteed offer in hand and then negotiate, go crazy with the others, but don't screw up the golden goose. That's kind of what I tell people.
Yeah, the biggest mistake I've seen, we literally had, I don't want to get too specific, but we're also probably 40, 50 minutes in. So viewership has probably declined. There's a lower chance that this person is watching. We had someone who got a $97,000 offer. I told them they wanted 100K. They wanted 100K. And when I asked them why, they were like, because I'd be more motivated. And it's like, okay, so basically what you're telling me is you want to have a 100K salary so you can tell your friends at the bar that you got a 100K salary. And they didn't really have a good answer for that. They decided to negotiate anyway and ask for $3,000 more. They had a $97,000 offer. They asked for $3,000 more. And they said they would feel extra motivated if they were at the 100K mark. And the company rescinded the offer because of that. They're like, I don't know if I can swear, but they're basically like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, we give you a 97K offer. The average SDR offer is 75K. And you are going to come and sit here and ask me for 100K for a $3,000 raise. So you in theory, can tell people that you have a 100K salary. Like, that is actually revealing that you're more worried about the status and the looks of having a 100K job than coming in and absolutely killing it as a sales rep. And so anyway, sorry, that was like, I needed to get that off my chest. I don't think I've told anyone that. So appreciate you listening. But like now the actual, yeah, like so you have two offers. Let's say you've got 75K at the company you want to work for. It's a market leader, a great logo. And you've got 85K at another company that's like, okay, but you're not super gung-ho about it. You've seen the history of some of the SDRs there. They don't always promote or they leave within a year and a half. If like at that point, it's not actually, in my mind, about necessarily getting the market leader to come up. You can certainly ask, right? But I think at that point, you have to make an almost unreasonable ask of the second company. And this is, by the way, when you actually have a PDF offer in hand. But this is how I would approach that situation. Anytime you get a verbal offer, let's say Connor calls me after my 4th round interview, says, hey, Eric, we're super excited. I just wanted to let you know, we're going to give you an offer. Really wanted to get your thoughts too. Like, you ready to go, all that. Never, when you get a verbal offer, accept it, or even a PDF offer, never accept it on the phone live in real time the first time you hear about it. I'm always going to ask like, hey, this is great. I really appreciate this. This process has gone really fast. As I mentioned, I really am just looking for maybe like 3 days to make a decision. I've got a couple things I need to think through, and then I can be able to give you a decision by Friday, end of day, if that works for you, right? And I've done a couple of things. I've made it clear that I'm talking to someone else without saying directly, like I'm comparing your offer to someone else, but also my unwillingness to accept right away. If Connor wants me specifically out of all the people he's interviewed and like I'm their top choice, he's going to immediately start asking like, oh, like what's, is there anything we can do to do that, all that. And you're still not going to negotiate on the phone. But anyway, set up a call. So say, thanks, this has been a great process. Can I give you an answer within 3 days? Then text them or email them in the morning, set up a call for later that next day to finally talk about it. And when I'm on the phone with Connor, I'm going to say, hey, Connor, this has been awesome. I really feel good about the offer I have at Oracle. Really where I'm at right now, just to be fully transparent, I do have an offer from someone else that is a higher OTE. I've thought about this a lot, and I know the offer was 75K. If Oracle could meet me at 80,000, where I get 2.5 more on my base and 2.5 more on my commission, I'd be ready to sign with Oracle today. And you're making it very clear that if they can meet you where you're at, you can sign today. I would do the same thing with the other company, but also, and really at this point, like if they don't match you at the extremely high number, you probably just walk away. But if Connor comes back and says like, hey, I'll be honest, Oracle is a standard 75, there's really not much we can do. Again, the way that you've asked is very respectful. And you've also made it clear that just because they can't do that, it's not like a no. So it's like, hey, I appreciate that. I to be honest, I didn't know Oracle was not flexible whatsoever. What I would say is if, like I mentioned, by end of day Friday, I can have a firm answer for you. And to be fully transparent, Oracle is the front runner right now. I just need to make sure I've kind of checked all the possibilities out there before I make a final decision. You've now just negotiated, even if not successfully in terms of getting the dollar amount, you've done so in a way that doesn't piss them off. And like we've literally had students do this exact thing and get rejected for an increase in salary and still get the job that they wanted and still take that offer at 75. So yeah.
That's gold. Replay that back, guys, because that could make you few $1,000s pretty easily if you're ever in that negotiation stage. I'll leave it there because I think that was really good advice.
And this works at every level. I was just going to add, I've done this successfully, not in the SDR role, but I've gotten like $25,000 more consistently, multiple times using that exact same script. So yeah.
Awesome. We covered a lot of ground today. And that's that we like doing this. We could obviously go in a lot more detail in any of these categories, and we certainly do on both of our channels, but maybe you want to cap off, like, how else have you worked with people? And if people are looking for some more hands-on guidance on the implementation as to all of this, like, where can they find you?
Yeah, we have the YouTube channel, Tech Sales with Higher Levels. Lots of great information there. And Connor is obviously part of our team as well. And I highly recommend his videos as well. Again, if maybe you're not in a position where you're looking for formal training. Honestly, I think find 1, 2, maybe 3 great channels that really align to your goals, and have people who have done what you want to do and focus on those. Like, I don't go on podcasts on any and everyone's channel. I'm very selective about who I partner with and put our brand out. And Connor is an amazing channel. And then also, if you are looking for guided training, at higherlevels.com, that's what we've been running now for the better part of 4 years. We've helped literally hundreds of people and work with thousands of reps at every level of their career. This year alone, like I said, we've had over 100 people break into tech sales, and not just any job, like people at Oracle, at AWS, at Salesforce, at Twilio, at CrowdStrike, at literally the best companies in the world. So to the earlier points that we were talking about, if you are looking for, not just like some great videos on the internet, but you're looking for literally people who say, this is exactly what you should do in this order, that also pairs with live weekly group coaching. That's exactly why we created Higher Levels. And yeah, it's been awesome, obviously, having you as part of the team and growing the channel.
Yep.
So
it's a great community. There's value more in addition to the actual hands-on guidance and content. The community aspect's also huge. I can't tell how many people I still talk to and work with in the community just in the last 6 months, even outside of the training. So there's a lot of value to that as well. It's been great to be a part of, and hope to see you guys in there. But anything else you want to cover off on before we call it a day here? I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't talk too much. I think my caffeine's finally wearing off, so we'll have to re-up. But yeah, hopefully everyone watching got a lot out of it. So
good stuff. All right. See you guys.